Welcome to new video, and today we're counting down our picks for the top 5 worst jobs in history. These are jobs that were dangerous, disgusting, or low-paying. The people who worked these jobs often had to endure harsh conditions and were at risk of injury or illness. Number 1. Groom of the stool. The groom of the stool was a royal position in medieval Europe that involved cleaning the king or queen's toilet. It was a very physically demanding and disgusting job, and the groom of the stool was often seen as a low-status servant. The groom of the stool would have to empty the king or queen's chamber pot, wash it out, and refill it with fresh water. They would also have to clean the toilet area and make sure it was free of flies and other pests. This was a very unpleasant job, and the groom of the stool often had to deal with unpleasant smells and bodily fluids. They were also at risk of contracting diseases from the waste they were handling. The groom of the stool was one of the worst jobs in history. It was a physically demanding, disgusting, and low-paying job. But it was also a very important job, as it helped to ensure the health and hygiene of the royal family. Number 2. Whipping boy. A whipping boy was a child who was punished instead of a prince or nobleman. The whipping boy would be dressed in the prince's clothes and would receive the beatings that were meant for the prince. This was a very cruel and humiliating job, and the whipping boy often suffered serious injuries. Whipping boys were often orphans or children of poor families. They were chosen for this job because they were seen as expendable. The prince's parents didn't want to see their own child get hurt, so they would send the whipping boy in their place. The practice of using whipping boys was common in Europe during the Middle Ages and Renaissance. It was eventually outlawed in most countries, but it continued in some places until the 19th century. The whipping boy was a very sad and unfortunate figure. They were victims of a cruel and unjust system. I'm glad that this practice is no longer legal, but it's important to remember the suffering that these children endured. Number 3. Tosher, a group of people who lived and worked in the sewers of London in the 19th century. Toshers were people who searched through the sewers of London for valuables. They would often find coins, jewelry, and other objects that had been lost or discarded. Toshers were also known to find lost children and animals. The job of a tosher was very dangerous and dirty. They often had to wade through human waste and sewage, and they were constantly exposed to disease. Toshers were also at risk of being injured by sharp objects or falling debris. Despite the dangers, toshering was a lucrative business. Toshers could earn a good living by selling the valuables they found. They were also seen as experts in the sewers, and they were often called upon to help with rescue operations. Number 4. Pure finder. A pure finder was a person who was hired to find lost objects in the sewers of London. This was a very dangerous and disgusting job, and pure finders often had to wade through human waste and sewage. They would use long poles with hooks on the end to search for objects, and they would often have to get very close to the waste in order to do their job. Pure finders were often paid very little, and they were considered to be at the bottom of the social hierarchy. They were often seen as dirty and disgusting, and they were often treated poorly by others. The pure finder was a very dangerous and disgusting job, and the people who did it were often treated poorly. But they were also essential to the City of London, as they helped to keep the sewers clean and free of debris. Number 5. Wool fuller. A wool fuller was a person who cleaned and processed wool. This was a very labor-intensive job, and fullers often had to work long hours in hot and humid conditions. The wool could also be very dirty, and fullers were often exposed to disease. The job of a wool fuller involved several steps. First, the wool had to be washed in water and soap. Then, it had to be beaten with wooden mallets to remove any dirt or debris. After that, it was stretched and dried. Finally, it was dyed or bleached. Wool fulling was a very important job in the Middle Ages. Wool was a major textile fiber, and fullers were responsible for making it clean and soft. However, it was also a very dangerous and unhealthy job. Fullers were often exposed to disease, and they could also be injured by the heavy machinery they used. I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching and subscribe for more videos.